So I've been inspired by this 5 minute podcast, or not 5 minute podcast, but it was a one last thought podcast invitation by Ido Singer. He was a guy that reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm doing this podcast, and would you be willing to share your one last thought with the world? If you only had, you know, one more thought to share, what would it be?" And he asked that, keep them relatively short, right around 5 minutes, something like that. And I was so inspired by the idea that I decided to flesh this out a little bit more and play around with the idea of just doing these mini on the fly recordings for people to listen to about my thoughts on everything. My main topic area, the place I love to talk about, is obviously presence and how do we show up in the world, how do we speak up in the world, how do we stand up and be ourselves. And that looks like lots of different things. It looks like public speaking, that looks like presentations, that looks like how do I hold myself in a meeting. And so I'm inspired, and I wanted to talk just for a moment with you today about imposter syndrome. And I don't know how it's worked for you, but imposter syndrome is something that I have fought with and lived with for as long as I can remember. Even back to being a kid and feeling like I was the kid in the classroom that didn't fit, and that I always felt like somehow or another I was on the perimeter of things and never in the game. And I couldn't tell you how true that really was, how much of that was in my head and how much of that was accurate. I think the truth lies somewhere in between always. We have black, white, and gray. I mean, it wasn't yes or no, it was yes and or no and but that feeling, that perception of not belonging and not being not being qualified or enough to be in the room is something that I struggle with to this day. Um, Goes by so many different names. I'm not enough. I didn't get this right. Perfectionism. But it's that lingering sense of I shouldn't be here because fill in the blank. I don't have enough of. I am not enough of. I don't know enough yet, etc., etc., etc. And for the longest time, I have fought imposter syndrome. So I thought that if I could perfect my way out of it, if I could learn all the tips and tricks and techniques to show up as, I don't even know, as perfect, that is the best way to say it. So in any situation, if I could show up as perfect, then I could beat imposter syndrome. And that has not proven to be true. That has never worked out for me. So I don't know. As if it's worked out for you, please call me because I want to know how you've done it. But I've read all the books, I've watched the movie. Back in the day I memorized The Secret. I worshipped at the Oprah altar, and I just could not get out of this feeling of being an imposter. So what I have discovered and what I am learning every day now is that the key to getting through imposter syndrome, or what's helping me to get through imposter syndrome, is not to fight it. It is absolutely not to fight that feeling, but to accept it and to own it and to say it out loud. So walking in and saying, I don't know something, walking into a room and acknowledging that I'm not going to be perfect, that I will fail, but also that I will succeed. And that most of the time, whatever I have envisioned as being so terrible and dramatic, and, it'll be the be all end all if they find out that I, love Cheetos and Netflix in my basement, or you name it, or that I've got lipstick on my pants, or that I don't know the answer to this question, or that I'm going to fail to answer the question adequately enough for you. I'm learning to accept that. I'm learning to accept that. I'm learning to ask more questions. I'm learning to show up and own the bits of me, the good, the bad, the imperfect, but most of all the good, because I think imposter syndrome wants to keep you in that sense that, our egos want to keep us in that sense of we aren't enough, when really we are. And all we have to do is be open to the experience of saying, I don't know. What could it be? What might it be? And just owning that experience of they'll never be perfect. There'll never be all the answers. And the joy and the excitement and the fun is saying that out loud, and then working on figuring out new and better ways to show up and be ourselves together. So there you have it, my ramblings on imposter syndrome and where I am in my own journey with being an imposter, of leading. Now I am leading with imposter syndrome instead of trying to hide the fact that I have it, or that it is something that gets the better of me some days. I'm leading with it. Imposter syndrome is very real, and I wanted you to know that have if you have it, if you can say that you have it, then you are absolutely, and even if you can't say it, let me rephrase that. Let me say that again. You aren't alone. You aren't alone in that. And it's part of what makes you you. It's part of being you. And acknowledging it helps it easier to be yourself and show up as your best every day. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.